So, one of the items on the Planetside 2 roadmap for 2022 is an Infantry Arsenal update, with things like new attachment options and directive weapon overhauls being on the list. But another thing that caught my eye in that list of planned updates was making a pass on less used weapons to make them more viable. Which got me thinking, what are the most underpowered weapons in the game right now? There's a few I could come up with, but boiling it down to 10 was a bit tricky. I did get there though. G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today we're going to be going over my top 10 underpowered infantry weapons in Planetside 2 as of today, and go over why I think they should receive some special attention in that upcoming infantry weapon overhaul. So when it came to coming up with this list, I sort of wanted to focus on weapons that I thought just really lacked any kind of purpose in the current arsenal, or had just sort of been power creeped out of the game over the years. I understand that all the weapons in this game are designed with the intent of being side grades of one another, and as a result, all fill a gap in the arsenal in some way, shape, or form. So coming up with weapons that I thought were objectively below average and that I just wasn't shitting on because I had a bad run with them was tough to do. But after taking a good, long, hard look at the arsenal of the game and also polling you guys in a community post here on YouTube a little bit ago, I think I've come up with a pretty good list here. These are the weapons that I genuinely believe either have no place in their respective arsenals right now, or have a niche that has a place but just needs to be given a bump in the right direction to make it a more viable option. Also, before anyone says anything, no, the novelty weapons don't qualify. I'm only interested in getting some feedback out there surrounding the core and actually serious weapons in the game to make them more viable. Anyway, let's get started. I want to start off here by getting the only two TR LMGs that made it to the E tier of my LMG tier list out of the way. I know some of you like these weapons, but I honestly can't see why. I know that sounds mean, but I'm just calling it how it is. These weapons sport a damage model that is mediocre at best, and while they both are incredibly accurate to counteract the lacking damage model, achieving the same accuracy which can be done with any of the other TR LMGs in the arsenal is just gonna net you better results. Now, that's not to say that the two weapons don't sort of fit a semi-unique role in being more passive LMGs for players who just don't like the aggressiveness of the other options. But what they offer doesn't match their price in the arsenal right now, and there sure as hell doesn't need to be two of these weapons that fit the same role. So definitely I'd like to see these two looked at in the near future. The EM1 is a strange sucker, and is just one of those weapons that I feel has been subjected to a bit of power creep over the years. It was for a while the only NC LMG that had a 143 damage model, and for that reason, it sort of acted as a lower damage chilled version of the arsenal that those who preferred rate of fire over raw damage output could opt for. Throw in the fact that you could mount an advanced laser sight to it for a bit of shenanigans, and it was something. And then the MGR L1 Promise came along, and with its unique recoil mechanic and better damage model, it's kind of forced the EM1 out of the picture here. So I'd like to see it get a cheeky revisiting. I just feel like there's more you can do with it to make it more competitive to run in the arsenal beyond just being a completionist weapon you use late in an Araxium run, for example. The Charger. I'm sure all of you knew this gun was coming. It's a gun that simply can't catch a break. I think we've looked at this thing, 3 times on the channel now, and no matter what happens to it, it still feels like an unnecessary challenge to use, in my opinion. At this stage, I think it's time we look at an overhaul for the weapon mechanically, because right now, it's the only gun in the game that leaves you on the back foot as soon as you have to engage more than one target in a magazine. And that's not due to the fact that you might have opened an engagement poorly or been out of position, but it's because you simply don't have the optimal damage output unless you are running a brand new mag, which is what I mean when I mention the unnecessary challenge to use it. The weapon puts you out of position by default whenever you take on a second hostile. It's not great. I think every TR player saw this weapon coming, except for the guy who came across my YouTube stream chat who unironically said he liked the weapon, and I was just sort of left wondering, sir, how? Like, allow me to introduce you to every other fun weapon in the TR arsenal that is better. But no, in all seriousness, it's a sniper rifle that isn't a sniper rifle and is one of the, if not the worst burst fire rifle in the game right now, sporting a tiny magazine size and a damage model that, while is a little higher than your traditional 167 damage model, doesn't get bumped up enough to make any meaningful impacts to the weapon's performance. It just feels like you're better off running a Saber 13 instead, consistently. Let's fix this weapon. The MKV Suppressed is a weapon that I've always despised in the game, and that's due to the very nature of its existence, to be a solution to a problem that never existed, and in accomplishing that, invalidating a combination of attachment options on another weapon entirely, while those attachments can still be bought on said weapon. To clarify, the MKV is a version of the NS7 PTW that sports better stats if you were to equip the suppressor on the PTW. That's all it is, which for one just ends up being a huge gotcha for anyone who is none the wiser, puts the suppressor on the PTW for a bunch of certs, only to learn it was the wrong choice. Something about that just doesn't sit right with me. But beyond that, the PTW is designed to be the ranged SMG available to soldiers, sacrificing outright CQC performance for a more long-range performance. Mounting a suppressor completely counteracts the entire intention of the weapon, not to mention the MKV sports an even harsher damage drop-off than its counterpart. The final build is just a very confusing weapon that seems to be battling itself, and let's just say I have very unhappy memories of raxing this thing. The Corvus is one of those weapons that I just feel needs a little bit of a bump back into the realm of being more viable. Being the only fully auto 167 damage model AR available to the VS, it's basically the big brother to the Pulsar C, but the Pulsar C sports the more aggressive fire rate, making it the deadlier option. It's just a worse Pulsar C where it doesn't need to be. Once again, I get it, it has good recoil and stuff like that, it just feels like it's missing something to make it worth actively using for a good amount of time. I was very close to putting the CME in this slot as well, but I just want to see the RHINO get a better heavy-hitting AR that isn't locked to a burst fire mode, hence why we're here instead. Alright, this is more of a general wide brush statement here, but we need a pass on the sidearms of this game across the board. And when I say that, I don't mean the weapons like the Commissioner, the Pilot, or the Underboss. I'm more referring to the faction-specific pistols that are as rare as hen's teeth because, well, no one's using them, and there's no point to do so. Why would you when you have a Commissioner or an Underboss to use? Like, those weapons have been the kings of the sidearm world since they were introduced due to their high skill ceiling, and I get it, there needs to be, you know, faction-specific pistols that offer lower skill floor, lower skill ceiling sort of builds that give players who aren't as good a means to defend themselves with the sidearm, but I think it would be great to see, across the board, the faction-specific sidearms get a pass to make them at least a bit more viable in the current meta. Some obviously need it more than others, but there's very clearly a case of power creep here at play that demands that these pistols get some love across the board. So, fingers crossed, sidearms get a pass. Alright, the PW16 HAILSTORM, or as many TR will have you know it, the HAILSTORM. This is the second generation TR SMG that sports the larger end magazine size at the cost of some raw killing power, similar to the Blitz GD10 and the Sirius XS12. The issue with this weapon, by comparison to its other faction counterparts, is that there's a trade-off of having an additional 10 rounds per magazine, and that is a reduction in the rate of fire output, thus throwing its raw damage output into the gutter respectively. It assumes you're going to be completing crowd control roles with this SMG, but with an SMG, that just isn't a role you should be aiming for in the first place. The HAILSTORM as a result is just not a competitive pick by the nature of how it attempts to achieve its role, and I'd like to see it get changed over time in the Infantry Arsenal update. Alright, look, I get it. There's a small cult of you crazed psychos out there that unironically like the YUMI, and while I'm constantly left asking myself, who hurt you? I'm also just left wondering if it's me that's the problem. But then I pick up the weapon and I'm reminded that no, there are some folks out there who just like pain. It's a weapon that is a chore to use. No matter how you cut it, you could do what you can do with this weapon easier with some of the other faction-specific burst fire options out there. The Vanquisher for the NC, the Saber for the TR, and the Lacerta for the VS. For the NS, well, alright, you guys actually have a reason to use this thing, I guess. But other options for the most part exist. And you throw in the fact that the game handles burst fire mechanics really clunky. Like if you initiate a burst with this weapon and you're hip firing, you can't aim down sights till the burst completes, which when you've got a wind-up mechanic in there, adding to that burst length, it just, again, makes the weapon even harder to make work and even clunkier to use. This thing just needs a big rework, big time in my opinion. So I've already thrown some shade the way of the LMGs today, but I feel like this weapon definitely gets a special place on the list because the more I look at it, the more mediocre it feels. I get it. It gets baked in SPA like the entirety of the NSO arsenal. It also gets a pretty accurate recoil pattern, but damn it also gets a horrendous rate of fire that makes it really difficult to be competitive with. It sports an absurdly long reload time for its damage model, especially when you consider it against the Naginata, which sports a better damage model and has only 10 rounds less in the magazine. Wait a second, this is just the Hailstorm treatment in the LMG form, isn't it? Yeah, unfortunately, this is a weapon that has fallen by the wayside on that front by making a lot of sacrifices for uptime when there are other weapons that arguably sport similar uptimes and have better damage outputs anyway. So yeah, this also needs addressing. Now, the more observant of you will notice that that makes up our top 10, but I also can't help myself here. We're throwing in a bonus round real quick. Yep, you saw that right, it's the Archer. Now, this is going to come to a shock for a lot of people, and it's in this list for reasons that you might not expect. Obviously, the Archer is a primary weapon. It's available to the Engineer exclusively, and it takes up your primary weapon slot. I actually have no issue with how the Archer is balanced currently. Like, maybe I'd like to see the rechambered time brought down by just a smidge, but generally speaking, it's a good weapon, and it's something that I've used from time to time. But where I have a problem with it is the fact that it takes up a primary weapon slot, and is a weapon that is the answer to only a niche amount of situations. It's really only designed to take out mech suits and lightly armored vehicles. And for that style of weapon to take up your entire primary weapon slot, well, that to me just feels like a bit of a waste, if I'm being completely honest. So instead, I'd like to see the Archer moved into the ability slot for the Engineer. When I say that, I'd like it to be a replacement to either your hard light barriers or your turrets. The turrets are unique answers to defensive opportunities on point holds and just general choke point holds. I feel like the Archer also kind of fits in that role. It's a unique defensive option for dealing with, in this particular instance, mech suits. So I'd like to see it treated the same way as turrets by being put in the ability slot, allowing the Engineer to still take a primary weapon into battle that will let them deal with core infantry, and then having the Archer as a specialized answer to a specialized threat. In this case, mech suits. If that change was made, there is a very good chance I would start maining Engineer. Maybe. We'll see how we go. But guys, with all of that said, that is going to wrap up today's video talking about what I consider to be the top 10, which I guess became the top 11, underpowered weapons in Planetside 2 as of right now. With this potential upcoming update coming to the infantry arsenal of the game, I think it's a great opportunity to start cleaning up some of the infantry arsenal and making amendments to weapons that have been in really rough patches of the game for a very long time. I'm all about arsenal viability. The more weapons we have in the game that are considered viable, the better the health of the weapon ecosystem, in my opinion. If you enjoyed today's video, guys, be sure to backhand the like button. It goes a long way to helping out this content on YouTube. And if you're new here, well, then consider subscribing. Also goes a long way to supporting the channel. Feel free to leave a comment down below on what the weapons you'd like to see get changed are in particular. Are there any weapons you think that are particularly underpowered that we didn't mention here today? Let me know. And as always, social media links are in the description down below, guys. Once again, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.